just to round off the conversation we had with the young people this morning, I'll speak briefly on just discovering your purpose, because part of what we saw here and what we had spoken of, it's a lot of context around young people discovering their purpose. And even as an adult, you need that. Father, bless your word in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. In Genesis chapter 45, verse 7 to 8, this is Joseph speaking, and he says, God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace and the governor of all Egypt. This was Joseph speaking after he meets his brothers. He had been in Egypt for a while, and he meets them. It took him a bit of time before he could reveal who he was. They couldn't recognize him. But there came a time when he had to actually speak and reveal who he was. These are the words that he shares with them as he reveals his true identity. And I want to talk about this moment that Joseph is in here. In fact, when you take it from verse 1, it says, Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, out, all of you. So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh. Listen to what it says in verse 3. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing in front of them. And he says, please come closer, he said to them. They came closer. He said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Then verse 7 and 8 follows on from that. This was a moment of what is referred to as theological reflection. It was a moment for David. He reflected theologically about his life, right? Because sometimes, often God's purposes are not immediately obvious to all of us. They require some reflection. They require time to understand what exactly is going on and what is your purpose in life. There are many things that the Bible is clear about. The Bible is clear about what sin is. The Bible is clear about marriage. The Bible is clear about family. The Bible is clear about many things. But there are some things that are not clear in the Bible. You will open the Bible, it will not tell you what career to take. The Bible will not tell you which type of business for you to pursue. It will not tell you which country to go and pursue it. Nor will it tell you the identity of the man or husband or wife you're supposed to take. For the young guys, yes, you may pray and read the scriptures. It will not tell you whether it's Mary, Martha, Jane, whatever, none. There are many things that the Bible does not clarify. But you need to learn God's ways of doing things. You need to learn God's ways of doing things. And this is what we call theological reflection is very valuable because particularly if you live and work in a place where God is not acknowledged. You know you find yourself in a place where there's nothing about God, but you are there. You're the only godly person. You're the only saved person, and you're the only person who understands Scripture. So this framework of godly purposes and what your divine purpose is, you must understand. The environment does not give you that. And the Bible will not tell you that now that you are working in this insurance company and the only Christian and nobody prays here, what are you to do? It doesn't tell you what your role is there. But you need this reflection and understanding. So you need to think carefully about what God may be doing in through and around us. What is God doing with me? What is God doing through me? What is happening around us so that you can make sense of what's going on? Can I say something? Joseph did not have a Bible, by the way. Joseph didn't go to Egypt carrying a Bible. He is not like you and I. All he had was God and the teachings that had been passed on from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then he left. That's all he had. So when he reflects about God's purposes, he had had a moment to reflect about God. And we ourselves find ourselves. So what is this theological reflection? What am I talking about? It is the process of finding God in experience. Can I repeat that? It is the process of doing what? Finding God in experience. It requires feelings to be engaged with reality. How you feel must be engaged with reality. Its aim is to change my life. It is to change your life through experiential and intellectual encounter. So your experiences considered in light of God will tell you where God is taking you to. So when you talk about discovering your purpose, you've got to undergo this theological reflection of your life. What do your experiences say? What is it that you have learned in order to arrive at, and this is God speaking? This is what this purpose is all about. Now, if we think about what for Joseph to get to where he was, it took him 13 years. 13 years. That's my calculation. My maths may be wrong. When Joseph was actually, so he was 17 when we meet him. If we go to Genesis chapter 37, let's go to Genesis chapter 37 so that you can see what I'm talking about. And some of you think you're too young. So Joseph was 17. So one night, Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundles stood up and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before me. His brothers responded, so you think you will be our king? Do you actually think he will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon David had another dream. And again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers. But his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dream meant. So there are many times when God shows you things that you don't understand. You may convey, but you do not understand because you have no frame for understanding at that time what it actually means, what your purpose is. I don't think Joseph understood what he was talking about. He doesn't say anything. The only people who say something are his brothers who are trying to interpret what he's saying. And many times, our purpose is mixed up with our confusion. And we don't know what it means. It takes some reflection to arrive at what exactly it means. It takes your experiences, it takes your intellect, and it takes your relationship with God. And so, all of this happens. David is 17 years old. All of this happens. Now, what happens from the age of 17, where we're talking about Joseph at the age of 17 is separated from his family. He is separated from who? His mother and father and his brothers. And he is secondly sold into slavery. Thirdly, he gets to Potiphar's house and he works diligently at Potiphar's house. After that, what happens is he is falsely accused of raping Potiphar's wife. And the next thing, Joseph is sent to prison. And after prison, this is where we find him. He becomes the vice regent of Egypt. So you want to see why I say Joseph was 17 years old. Let's go to Genesis chapter 37 And look at verse 2. It says, this is the account of Jacob and his family when Joseph was how many years old? 17 years old. You are not too young for God to have a purpose over your life. Whatever God has revealed in your life, it is true. The only challenge is that you have not had a moment of reflection through your experiences, what God exactly is saying to you. And that's what he had. He was 17 years old when he had this. And he was 30 years old when he became the vice regent. He was a young person. All of this happens when he is what? Young. Sometimes young people here think they are waiting for something to happen before they can get on with godly purpose. No. You are fully in God's hands. And he is working on you. Right, and we can see that when we look at Genesis chapter 41, verse 46. Let's look at Genesis 41, verse 46. To see the age of Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it in Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen and clothing and hung on let's see this, and hung a gold chain around his neck. Let's jump to verse 46. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, which means from 17 years old, all of the drama that happened in Joseph's life was actually preparing him for this moment. And everything that was happening in Joseph's life, even though he had been anointed by God, he was blessed by God, was not pretty. It was not nice. I'm sure he cried every day about why he was separated from his family. Why did he have to be removed from his family to become a slave? He didn't move to become a super citizen in Egypt. He went there to become a slave. And over and above becoming a slave, he works honestly for Potiphar and he gets a raw deal. As if that is not enough, he's then accused of being a rapist. Above that, he's then sent to jail. I don't know how unfair things look and how incongruent to his dream and what God has said, what he's going to be. All of this does not look like the dream is working. Have you ever felt like that as a person? Where it looks like this life is not working. Everything that God has revealed is not working. It's not coming together. But Joseph had to come to what I would call a why me moment. Have you ever come to that moment where you say, why me? Why me? Why is it me that I have to work so hard to get my degree and I've got it and now I'm sitting and no job is coming? Why me? Why me when I actually get the job, my parents start telling me I've got to support all my brothers? Why me? Why am I the only one who's got to build for everybody else whilst everybody else doesn't seem to be bothered? Why me? Have you ever felt like that? Where you have these why me moments. Joseph had why me moments. And when he was asking that question, going through what I call theological reflection, he still knew that God had anointed him to be something, but that something had not arrived. But when we meet him, he says to his brothers in chapter 45, he says, no. You see, whatever you did, it was not you. You guys sold me to slavery, it was not you. God sent me in advance as an advance party to save you. And you see here that Joseph's reflections are not superficial. Sometimes, as children of God, we like reflecting on the good and not reflect on the bad. Because we don't want to learn the lessons in the difficult parts of our lives. But can I say to you, you can't disown any part of your life because it's part of you. I know some people say, I'm going to bury my past. Don't bury your past anywhere. You see, Joseph, when he sat in front of his brother, he didn't bury the fact that he had been a convicted criminal who was falsely accused, sent to prison. Because he can't talk about becoming the vice premier of Egypt without talking about the fact that he went to prison and met two people who were to talk about him. He can't stop that. He can't tell anybody his story about being the vice premier without talking about, I once had a dream. And he can't talk about why he is representing his advanced party of the Jewish people without talking about how his brother sold him. We like selecting reflections on our lives, taking the good parts and forget about the bad part. But can I tell you something? Don't be afraid of reflecting on where God is taking you to. Take every part of it, because right in there, God will be talking to you about where he's taking you to. The hurt that you have experienced today is a testimony tomorrow. It's a testimony tomorrow. So, in fact, sometimes the bad things, some of the bad things that people do to you are part of where God is taking you to. Some of the pain that you are feeling right now when your boss is not acknowledging your performance is part of your journey. Some of the doors that are being closed for you are part of your journey. Some of the heartache and the heartbreak that you're going through is part of your journey. The only thing is your survival and overcoming only comes from God. It's part of your shameful history of alcoholism, of drug doing, of taking drugs, and of being despised is part of your journey. You can't disown it. You can't disown it. In Romans chapter 8, let's go there, Romans chapter 8, verse 28 to 30. Look at what it says. I'll read it in the NLT. Look at what it says. It says, and we know that God, let's read it. And I know that God causes some things. It causes what? Some things. Yeah. All things to do what? To work together for the good of those who do what? Love him. And all are called according to his purposes for them. So everything, the fact that you were sick and you almost died is about you. The fact that you were in an accident that you did not cause is about you. The fact that you came from a family that could not rub anything together is about you. It's about where God is taking you to. The fact that you come from a family where your father was an alcoholic and he sleeps and is an embarrassment is about you. It's about your future. But he works all of it for your good. The fact that you come from a broken family is about you. Because God is shaping who? You. For his what? Purposes. So there are tough questions which Joseph had to ask himself before when he saw his brothers. I'm sure the first time he saw them, everything came back to him. When he saw them come to apply for grain, everything came to him. And look at the questions that he has. Why did his brothers disrupt his life? Why did these chaps take me? Why did they sell me away from me? I could have grown up with my parents. I was too young. I was only 17. Secondly, why was he wrenched from his family and taken to be a slave in Egypt? I'm sure he asked himself that. Why did he have to spend several years in prison on a fraudulent charge? Why should he suddenly find himself, elevated to unparalleled power and prominence over one of the world's greatest empires at the time? Why him? Where was God in all of this? Where was God? Why had he allowed all of this to happen? And now as he faced his brothers, why should he show them mercy? Why? I'm sure he asked himself all these questions. And why should he not avenge the suffering that they caused him? I am sure you ask yourself many of these questions. Sometimes we think our purpose is a clear thing. You think it's a clear thing? The fact that today you are a doctor, you think that's your purpose. Your purpose is not just being a doctor. There may be something else that God is doing with your life. And I pray that your purpose comes through early enough. The problem is we are afraid of sitting down and reflecting and allow God to help us make sense of it all. Because when he does that, he will cause you to hug your brothers. He'll do what? Cause you to hug everybody who hated you. To feed these chaps who said, we are selling him. I think that's why we're afraid of it. Because God will start asking you the tough questions and say, your will, my will must be done now. He saw all of them. You think Joseph was a Christian. His heart was good. He hugged of him. He must have seen them and said, this is the one who stripped me of my gown. This is the one who held me and threw me in the pit. I heard them say, negotiating with those strangers who were passing by saying, we are selling him. He's the one who spoke. And these ones just stood by. They didn't do anything. They were all there. You think it was easy for him? No, it wasn't easy. And he had all the powers. He could summon the army and say, arrest all of these guys, put them in prison because they are bad people. I won't even tell you what they did, but they are horrible people. The reason why you are afraid of having this conversation with God is because he's going to ask you hard questions. He's going to reveal your real purpose. You are happy to be the vice premier, to be the one who's occupying a prominent position, who's got the means to do things. You are happy to be celebrated with your gown and your position and your successful. You are happy to do that. You are happy to be the married person with your husband and wife, and you've got a beautiful heart. But you are not happy when God says, now go and build a house for your father who's a drunkard. You are not happy with that. You're not happy with your brother who is lazy, whom you have to fund. You've got to take him back to school and make him do something. You are not happy when God reveals that purpose. You're not happy when God says, now, you are going to be the bridge that your children, your brother's children are going to walk through to get to their future. Pay all the school fees for them. You're not happy with that. You're not happy when God says, you've got to run this company and be fair to all the black and white people. And you say, these white people dispossessed us of our land. They took my grandparents' house and they caused everything to be lost. You are not happy with that. When God says, I put you here so that you run this country so that there is no racism. You just want to be a president. But when God says be a president of all, and love them all, you're afraid of that. I think the reason why we don't want to have reflective moments is because when God opens our eyes, you want to run away. You know what Joseph says? Joseph says the following ultimately. This is where I finish. It took him knowing God and understanding him to remind him what those dreams were about. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, after he's reflected, he then says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Your life and the lives of many people. That is what it took. And that's challenging for many people. So if you've been battling with your purpose, it's not too difficult. Pull together your experiences. Pull together what you know of this word. And then go to God and say, what is it all about? And he will tell you. For young people, I pray that you see it early. I pray that you have this experience that Samuel had. A couple of times when God was speaking to him, he went to the wrong man. A couple of times when God spoke to him, he went to the wrong man. Thank God he had a mentor and a coach who said to him, next time, don't come to me. Say, what are you saying, God? And God spoke to him and told him everything. and he walked this path. But I also pray that if it takes time, I pray that you have a Joseph moment where you make sense of all of it. I also pray that maybe you have people like Mordecai who will remind you as a Ruth, that Ruth, you seem to be too comfortable now, but there is a problem that's waiting for you. Might it be that you are born for this moment? And please assume your position and do right. If we did that, what the youth of 76 did will look like child's play when God is using you for your generation. You'll take inspiration from June 16 to what you are supposed to do. None of the young people who are here are without a mission. Can I repeat that? All of us have a mission. It just depends on whether you've allowed God to reveal things to you or not. I pray that the words that are written on the plaque of your cemetery are not Umzigayise Dlamini was born. Waphila wadla wasuta ufile ngoku. I'm sorry if igama lakho Umzigayise, but I'm just saying. I pray that's not what's going to happen. Amen. Let me close.